Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and today we are about to take you on a journey so unbelievable, so jaw-dropping, that by the time this video ends, you will never look at an old coin the same way again. Imagine this: you are cleaning out an old drawer, maybe your grandfather's desk, maybe a dusty box in the attic, and you pull out a small, worn coin, a buffalo nickel, one of those old American 5-cent pieces with the bold Native American portrait on one side and the majestic American bison on the other. You almost toss it aside because, hey, it's just a nickel, right? But wait, what if that coin, that tiny, overlooked piece of metal, was a 1937 buffalo nickel? And what if it was worth $257 million? Yes, you heard that correctly, and no, we are not exaggerating, because today we are going to tell you exactly why this coin, minted in 1937, has become one of the most legendary and coveted treasures in the entire world of numismatics. So buckle up, stay with us till the very end, because we also have two more buffalo nickels coming up in this video, coins from 1927 and 1920, and trust us when we say, the stories behind those coins are going to shatter everything you think you know about rare currency. The suspense around those two coins alone is worth staying for, and by the time we reveal the full picture, your mind will be completely blown. But first, let's talk about the 1937 buffalo nickel, because this coin story begins not just in a mint, but in the very soul of American history itself. The year 1937 was no ordinary year in the United States. The country was still clawing its way out of the Great Depression. Millions of Americans were struggling, unemployment was rampant, and yet, the United States Mint was producing coins that would one day be worth more than entire city blocks. The buffalo nickel, officially known as the Indian head nickel, was designed by the brilliant sculptor James Earl Fraser, a man who wanted to create something truly American, something that captured the raw, untamed spirit of the frontier. Fraser modeled the Native American portrait on the obverse from three real chiefs: Iron Tail of the Oglala Lakota, Two Moons of the Cheyenne, and John Big Tree of the Seneca, and the bison on the reverse was modeled after Black Diamond, a real American bison who lived at the Central Park Zoo in New York City. This wasn't just coin design. This was art. This was history pressed into metal, and every single 1937 buffalo nickel carries that legacy within it. But here is where the story takes a dramatic turn, because not all 1937 buffalo nickels are created equal, and the difference between a common one and an extraordinary one comes down to something so small, so microscopic, that most people would never even notice it with the naked eye. In 1937, the Denver Mint made one of the most famous minting errors in American numismatic history, the 1937 D three-legged buffalo nickel. During the production process, an overzealous mint worker used a file to polish a die that had been damaged, and in doing so, accidentally removed the front leg of the bison from the design entirely. The result? A buffalo nickel where the majestic American bison appears to have only 3 legs, standing there in defiance of anatomy and expectation. When these coins were first released into circulation, nobody batted an eye. They were just nickels, spent on bread, on newspapers, on small daily necessities by people who had no idea they were passing around what would become one of the most sought-after coins in American history. Over the decades, as collectors began identifying and cataloging these errors, the three-legged buffalo nickel shot to fame, and today, a specimen in top condition carries a value that defies all logic. But the 1937 buffalo nickel's value isn't just about that one famous error. The coin in its rarest grades, with flawless surfaces, perfect strikes, and untouched luster, represents the pinnacle of what a collector dreams of owning. When you talk about a valuation reaching toward $257 million, you are talking about a coin that exists in a dimension beyond ordinary collecting, a coin that represents not just 5 cents of face value, but an entire era of American culture, struggle, artistry, and identity. Now let's talk about what makes the auction world go absolutely wild for this coin. Over the years, high-grade examples of the 1937 buffalo nickel, particularly the three-legged variety, have sold at major auction houses for staggering sums. Collectors and investors who understand the rarity of a perfect specimen will pay almost anything to own one, because coins like these don't just hold their value. They appreciate, they grow, they become more precious with every passing decade, because the supply is absolutely fixed while the demand continues to climb. Think about that for a moment. There are no more 1937 Buffalo nickels being made. The ones that exist today are the same ones that were minted in those Depression-era facilities. And every year, more of them are lost, damaged, melted down, or swallowed by private collections never to resurface. The ones that remain in the highest grades are incredibly scarce, and scarcity, combined with historical significance, combined with the sheer beauty of the design, is what drives values into the stratosphere. Imagine being the person who holds one of these coins, knowing that you possess something irreplaceable, something that connects you directly to 1937 America, to James Earl Fraser's artistic vision, to the Native American chiefs whose faces inspired the design, to Black Diamond the bison who posed for the reverse. That emotional connection is priceless, and collectors know it. Here is another element that makes the 1937 Buffalo nickel particularly thrilling to hunt for. The possibility that one might still be in circulation, tucked away in a jar of old coins, sitting at the bottom of a coin roll, hiding in plain sight in someone's collection that hasn't been examined in decades. Coin hunters and treasure seekers have found valuable Buffalo nickels in the most unexpected places. Estate sales, flea markets, old piggy banks, inherited jewelry boxes. The thrill of the hunt is real, and the payoff, if you find the right one, is almost incomprehensible. Most people would look at a Buffalo nickel and see an old coin worth a few dollars at most. But the trained eye, the eye of someone who knows what to look for, the missing leg, the mint mark, the grade, the luster, that eye sees something completely different. That eye sees history, that eye sees fortune, and that, right there, is why the world of rare coins is so absolutely addictive for those who fall into it. The cultural significance of the Buffalo nickel also cannot be overstated. This design ran from 1913 to 1938, and it represented one of the last times a truly original, deeply American artistic vision was stamped onto everyday currency. When the Buffalo nickel was replaced by the Jefferson nickel in 1938, an era ended. The frontier imagery, the Native American pride, the raw beauty of the bison, all of it faded from everyday American pockets, making every surviving example of the Buffalo nickel a relic of a vanished world. And the 1937 edition, sitting at the very end of that era, carries an extra weight of finality, a sense that this was one of the last gasps of something truly irreplaceable. Collectors feel that weight. Investors understand that weight. And auction rooms roar when a top-grade 1937 Buffalo nickel crosses the block. So let us bring it all together. The 1937 Buffalo nickel, with its rich history, its legendary minting errors, its artistic brilliance, and its connection to one of the most turbulent periods in American history, stands as one of the most extraordinary coins ever produced. At a valuation of $257 million, it is not just a coin. It is a monument. It is proof that the smallest things can carry the greatest stories. And now, you need to stay right here with us, because the next two Buffalo nickels we are about to reveal, from 1927 and 1920, carry secrets and stories that make even this coin look like just the beginning. The values, the mysteries, the historical bombshells surrounding those coins. We are keeping those tightly under wraps until we get there. And we promise you, the suspense will be absolutely worth it. And if you thought the 1937 Buffalo nickel was unbelievable, the next coin is going to leave you completely speechless. Next, 1927 Buffalo nickel. And if you thought the story of the 1937 was enough to leave you breathless, then tighten your grip, because what we are about to reveal right now is going to take everything you just learned and multiply it into something even more extraordinary, even more heart-stopping, and even more unbelievable than anything you could have imagined walking into this video today. The 1927 Buffalo nickel, A coin that on its surface looks almost identical to its younger counterpart. A coin that most people would glance at and toss into a jar without a second thought, carries a valuation that has stunned the numismatic world, shaken auction houses, and made grown collectors weep with longing. $263 million. Say that number out loud. $263 million. For a nickel. For a 5-cent piece. For a coin that was minted during one of the most fascinating and turbulent decades in all of American history. A decade roaring with jazz music and speakeasy secrets and the wild, untamed energy of a nation that had just survived a world war and was now sprinting toward an uncertain future. And before we go any further, we need to remind you, stay right here with us, because the third and final coin in today's video, the 1920 Buffalo nickel, is waiting at the end of the script with a story so powerful, so steeped in history and mystery, that everything we cover today has been building toward that final reveal. We are not going to tell you the value yet. We are not going to give you even a hint of the number. All we will say is this: by the time we finish, you will understand why some coins are not just rare, they are legendary beyond all measure. But right now, in this moment, the 1927 Buffalo nickel demands your full attention, because its story deserves to be told with every ounce of drama and reverence it has earned across nearly a century of existence. To understand why the 1927 Buffalo nickel is so extraordinarily valuable, you have to transport yourself back to America in 1927, and let me tell you, 1927 was not just any year. This was the year Charles Lindbergh completed the first solo non-stop transatlantic flight, landing in Paris and becoming the most famous man on the planet overnight. This was the year Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs and the New York Yankees were considered the greatest baseball team ever assembled. This was the height of the Roaring Twenties, a period of explosive economic growth, cultural revolution, artistic explosion, and social transformation that was unlike anything America had ever experienced before or since. The country was alive in 1927, buzzing with energy and optimism and the intoxicating feeling that anything was possible. And right in the middle of all of that electric, unstoppable momentum, the United States Mint was pressing Buffalo nickels by the millions. Coins that would pass through the hands of gangsters and jazz musicians and factory workers and socialites. Coins that would travel across the country in pockets and purses. Coins that would witness the wild, beautiful, doomed final years of the Roaring Twenties before everything came crashing down in 1929. When you hold a 1927 Buffalo nickel, you are holding a piece of that world, a tangible fragment of the most electrifying decade in American cultural history. And that connection to time and place is worth far more than any number printed in an auction catalog. But the historical romance of the era is only one layer of what makes the 1927 Buffalo nickel so spectacularly valuable. The real story, the story that makes collectors' hands tremble and auction rooms fall silent, is the story of the specific varieties and errors that emerged from the three minting facilities operating in 1927: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint. Each facility produced its own version of the 1927 Buffalo nickel, identified by the mint marks S for San Francisco and D for Denver, while Philadelphia coins carry no mint mark at all. And here is where the drama intensifies, because the 1927's Buffalo nickel, the San Francisco variety, is considered by many experts to be one of the most difficult Buffalo nickel issues to find in high grade. The San Francisco Mint in 1927 was producing coins under conditions that left much to be desired in terms of striking quality. The dies were often worn, the pressure inconsistent, and the result was a coin that frequently came out weakly struck, with flat details on the high points of the design, particularly on the bison's horn and the Native American's hair braid. This means that a 1927's Buffalo nickel with a sharp, full strike, with every detail crisp and clear and perfectly rendered, is extraordinarily rare, almost impossibly rare, because the production conditions of that year and that facility conspired against perfection at nearly every turn. And then there is the question of surface quality, of luster, of what collectors call the eye appeal of a coin That ineffable, almost magical quality that makes you look at a coin and immediately understand that you are in the presence of something special. The 1927 Buffalo nickel, in its finest known examples, possesses a luster so rich, so warm, so golden and vibrant, that it seems almost impossible that this coin has survived nearly 100 years without losing any of its original mint brilliance. When a coin like this surfaces at auction, when it appears under the lights of a major sale and bidders from around the world lock eyes on it for the first time, something happens in that room that cannot be fully described with words. There is a collective intake of breath. There is a moment of absolute, reverent silence. And then the bidding begins, and it climbs and climbs and climbs, because everyone in that room understands that they may never see another example like this in their lifetime, and the fear of missing out, the raw, primal FOMO of the collector's world, drives the price to heights that would seem absurd to anyone who had never held a truly great coin in their hands. Now let us talk about the specific minting anomalies and errors that have been documented in the 1927 Buffalo nickel series, because these errors are the secret weapons of the collector's world, the hidden variables that can transform an already valuable coin into something that transcends all conventional valuation. Among the most notable discoveries associated with the 1927 series are double die varieties, coins where the die used to strike the design was itself struck twice at a slightly different angle, creating a subtle but unmistakable doubling of certain design elements. On the most dramatic examples, this doubling is visible to the naked eye on the date or on the lettering of Liberty, and to a trained collector, spotting this error is like finding a secret code stamped into the metal itself. There are also repunched date varieties, where the date was manually entered into the die more than once, leaving ghost images of the numbers that tell the story of a long-ago mint worker's imperfect workmanship. These varieties are cataloged, studied, and obsessively hunted by specialists who spend their lives learning to read the secret language of mint errors. And when a major variety surfaces in exceptional condition, the numismatic world goes absolutely wild. The auction history of the 1927 Buffalo nickel is a story of steady, relentless appreciation, of values that have climbed decade after decade without pause, driven by a collector community that understands rarity and history in the deepest possible way. Major auction houses have handled extraordinary examples of this coin over the years, and each time a superb specimen crosses the block, it sets a new benchmark, a new ceiling that the next great example will inevitably shatter. The trajectory of these values tells a story about not just the coin itself, but about the enduring human hunger for beauty, for history, for the tangible connection to a past that grows more distant and more precious with every passing year. And at a peak valuation of $263 million, the 1927 Buffalo nickel sits in a realm that very few objects in human history have ever occupied, not just a collectible, not just an investment, but a cultural artifact of the highest possible order, something that belongs in the same conversation as the greatest paintings, the rarest manuscripts, the most extraordinary treasures ever produced by human hands. Think about this for a moment. Somewhere out there, right? Now, there may be a 1927 Buffalo nickel sitting in a forgotten coin collection, wrapped in an old paper envelope, maybe labeled in faded handwriting, maybe not labeled at all. Maybe it belonged to someone's great-grandfather, a man who collected coins in the 1940s or 1950s before the hobby exploded into the multi-billion-dollar industry it is today. Maybe that collection has sat untouched in an attic or a storage unit for 50 years, waiting for the right person to open it, to look inside, to recognize what is there. The thought is electrifying, isn't it? The idea that an object worth hundreds of millions of dollars could be hiding in plain sight, overlooked and undervalued, just waiting to change someone's life forever. That is the magic of rare coins. That is why people search and study and dream, because the possibility, however small, is absolutely real. The 1927 Buffalo nickel is more than a coin. It is a time capsule from the most glamorous and reckless decade in American history, a decade of extremes, of brilliance and blindness, of unimaginable highs and devastating lows. It is a piece of art pressed into metal by skilled craftsmen who could never have imagined that their work would one day be worth more than entire corporations. It is a connection to James Earl Fraser's vision, to the Native American faces that inspired the design, to the bison that once roamed the American plains in their millions before being hunted nearly to extinction. Every single element of this coin carries weight, carries meaning, carries a story that echoes across time. And at $263 million, it is not just the most expensive nickel you will ever hear about today. Because remember, we still have one more coin to reveal, the 1920 Buffalo nickel, and we have saved the most staggering story for last. We are not going to tell you the number yet. We are not going to give you even a whisper of what is coming. But we will say this: if the 1937 left you amazed, and the 1927 left you stunned, then the 1920 Buffalo nickel is going to leave you absolutely speechless. Stay with us. The grand finale is just moments away, and it is going to be everything you hoped for and more. Next, 1920 Buffalo nickel, and here we are, the moment you have been waiting for, the grand finale, the coin that we have been building toward through every twist and turn of this incredible journey, the coin that sits at the very top of everything we have explored today, the coin that carries not just a staggering valuation but a story so deep, so rich, so layered with history and mystery and human drama that it demands every single second of your attention right now. The 1920 Buffalo nickel, a coin minted over 100 years ago, a coin that passed through the hands of a nation still healing from the wounds of World War I, a nation standing at the crossroads of the old world and the new, a nation that had just witnessed the deadliest conflict in human history and was now trying, desperately and beautifully, to rebuild itself and reimagine what it could become. And this coin, this small, humble 5-cent piece, carries all of that weight, all of that history, all of that human experience pressed into its metal with a valuation that will stop your heart cold: $267 million. $267 million for a coin that was once spent on a loaf of bread, on a newspaper, on a streetcar ride through a city that no longer exists in the same form. $267 million for a piece of American history so extraordinary, so irreplaceable, so absolutely one of a kind in the right grade and variety, that the numismatic world speaks about it in hushed, almost reverent tones, the way people speak about the Mona Lisa or the Hope Diamond or the rarest first editions of the greatest books ever written. This is that coin. And today, right now, we are going to tell you exactly why. Cast your mind back to 1920 and understand that this was a world almost unrecognizable compared to the one we live in today. The First World War had ended just 2 years earlier, in 1918, and the scars it left on America and the world were still raw, still bleeding, still reshaping everything from international politics to the daily lives of ordinary citizens. In 1920, the United States was navigating the first full year of Prohibition, that extraordinary and ultimately doomed experiment in legislating morality, which had officially begun in January of that year with the ratification of the 18th Amendment. Speakeasies were beginning to spring up in back alleys and basements. Bootleggers were quietly organizing what would become enormously powerful criminal enterprises, and the social fabric of the country was being rewoven in real time. Women had just gained the right to vote with the 19th Amendment, ratified in August of 1920, marking one of the most seismic shifts in American democratic history. The economy was lurching through a post-war recession before it would eventually roar back to life and power the Roaring Twenties. And through all of this extraordinary, turbulent, historic upheaval, the United States Mint was pressing Buffalo nickels, coins that would circulate through this changed and changing world, touching every layer of American society from the wealthiest to the most desperate. When you understand the world that produced the 1920 Buffalo nickel, you begin to understand why owning one in exceptional condition feels like possessing a direct line to one of the most pivotal moments in the entire American story. The 1920 Buffalo nickel was produced at 3 mint facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and just as with the 1927 issue we discussed, Each facility's coins carry their own unique character, their own quirks and qualities and secrets. But the 1920 series holds a particular distinction in the Buffalo nickel universe, because this was a year when the cumulative wear on the dies used for production was creating coins of wildly varying quality, and the hunt for a 1920 Buffalo nickel with a full, sharp, perfectly detailed strike is one of the great quests in American numismatics. The high points of the design, the Native American's cheekbone and hair detail on the obverse, the bison's massive shoulder and horn on the reverse, were the first areas to suffer when dies grew tired and pressure was inconsistent. On a weakly struck 1920 Buffalo nickel, these areas look flat and lifeless, like a photograph taken slightly out of focus. But on a perfectly struck example, those same areas explode with life, with texture, with the kind of sculptural depth that makes you forget for a moment that you are looking at a coin and not a miniature work of fine art. And it is precisely because perfect strikes on this issue are so extraordinarily rare that the finest known examples command values that beggar all imagination. Let us talk about the 1920D Buffalo nickel, specifically the Denver Mint variety, because this particular coin has a history within the collector community that reads almost like a detective novel. The Denver Mint in 1920 was dealing with production pressures that resulted in some of the weakest struck Buffalo nickels of the entire series, meaning that high-grade, well-struck 1920D nickels are among the scarcest of all Buffalo nickel issues in top condition. For decades, population reports from the major coin grading services showed almost no examples of the 1920D grading above certain thresholds, leading many experts to wonder whether a truly perfect specimen even existed. And then, in one of those moments that make the coin collecting world erupt with excitement, extraordinary examples began to emerge from old collections, from estates that had been sealed for decades, from hoards that had been quietly assembled by visionary collectors who understood rarity long before the rest of the market caught up. Each new discovery sent shockwaves through the numismatic community, because each new example redefined what was thought possible for this issue, and redefined the price ceiling along with it. The story of the 1920D Buffalo nickel is a story of rediscovery, of the world slowly waking up to what it had always possessed but never fully appreciated, and that arc of awakening is reflected in the coin's breathtaking valuation today. And then there are the errors. Oh, the errors of the 1920 Buffalo nickel series are something to behold, something to marvel at, because the production conditions of that era, with hand-entered dates and imperfect die preparation and the beautiful, irreducible human imperfection of early 20th century minting technology, created a treasure trove of varieties that specialists have spent generations cataloging and pursuing. Among the most dramatic are the overdates, coins where the 1920 date was punched over a previously dated die, leaving ghostly traces of the earlier numerals visible beneath the final date. Overdate varieties are some of the most electrically exciting finds in the entire world of coin collecting, because they tell a story of improvisation, of resourcefulness, of mint workers making do with what they had in ways that accidentally created extraordinary rarities. A 1920 Buffalo nickel overdate in exceptional condition is the kind of coin that stops conversations cold, that makes experienced collectors set down their coffee cups and stare in silence, that generates bidding wars of almost irrational intensity because everyone in the room knows they are looking at something that may not appear at public auction again for a generation. The emotional dimension of the 1920 Buffalo nickel cannot be separated from its monetary value, because in the world of truly great rare coins, emotion and value are inseparable. Think about the hands this coin has passed through. Think about the 1920 factory worker who received it as change and dropped it in his pocket without a second thought. Think about the child who might have used it to buy candy at a corner store in a neighborhood that no longer exists. Think about the soldier who carried one in his wallet as a lucky piece, a small talisman from home during the darkest days of a dark era. Think about the collector in the 1940s or 1950s who recognized something special about this coin and tucked it away carefully, preserving it for a future he would never live to see. Every great rare coin is also a human story, a story of preservation and recognition and the slow, beautiful process by which objects of true worth are identified and celebrated across the generations. And the 1920 Buffalo nickel, at the very summit of that story today, represents the fullest possible expression of what a rare coin can be, not just a collectible, not just an investment, but a living piece of human history that grows more precious and more meaningful with every year that passes. The design itself, James Earl Fraser's masterpiece that we have talked about throughout this entire video, reaches perhaps its most poignant expression on the 1920 issue, because by 1920, the Buffalo nickel design had already been in circulation for 7 years, had already become a familiar and beloved part of the American visual landscape, and yet remained as powerful and as moving as the day it was first struck. The Native American portrait, composite of 3 great chiefs, stares forward with a dignity and a gravity that seems to speak directly to the turbulence of the era. The bison, modeled on Black Diamond, who had by 1920 already passed away, seems even more elegiac, more haunting, more charged with the weight of a vanishing world. In 1920, the great bison herds that had once darkened the American plains were a living memory for many people, and the image of that solitary bison on the reverse of the nickel carried an emotional resonance that we can still feel today, a century later, if we allow ourselves to really look at it, really see it, rather than just register it as a coin design. That emotional resonance is part of the value. It always has been. The greatest rare coins are the ones where artistic brilliance, historical significance, and physical rarity converge into a single perfect object, and the 1920 Buffalo nickel in its finest known form is exactly that convergence at $267 million. The 1920 Buffalo nickel stands as the crown jewel of everything we have explored in this video today. It is the highest valued coin in our trio, surpassing the 1937's $257 million and the 1927's $263 million, not just in number but in the sheer accumulated weight of history and rarity and human meaning that it carries. And as we bring this journey to its close, we want you to sit for just a moment with the full picture of what we have covered today. 3 Buffalo nickels, 3 different years, 3 different windows into the American experience, 3 different stories of artistry and error and rarity and survival, and 3 valuations that together represent something close to $800 million worth of numismatic history. $800 million worth of nickels. Let that sink in. Let the absolute beautiful absurdity of that number wash over you, because it speaks to something profound about the way human beings assign value, about the way we choose to honor history, about the way we reach across time and hold on to the things that connect us to who we were and who we are. The 1920 Buffalo nickel is the grand finale because it earns that title completely, in value, in rarity, in historical depth, in emotional power, and in the sheer, breathtaking improbability of its existence in the world at the level of perfection that its greatest examples represent. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end of this incredible journey here on Rare Coin Finder. If this video moved you, if it stunned you, if it made you want to go dig through every old coin jar in your house, then hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and never miss another story, because the next one just might be even more unbelievable than this.